For Her by Pyre. Only chapter. Lost in the darkness, silence surrounds you. There once was morning, now endless night. I will find the answer. I will never desert you. I promise this, till the day that I... From Jekyll and Hyde. Celestia trotted through the corridors of the castle, humming softly to herself. It was the dim hours of the morning, just before the summer sun celebration was to begin. She and Luna were due at the platform in scant hours, as she had not seen her sister yet. Luna always woke much earlier than she. The night was hers after all, and over time her younger sister had taken to spending more of her waking hours in it. But this was approaching strange. Luna had not been in Canterlot mingling with the populace, and she had not been seen at any of the usual places the sisters spent their time. She finally found the younger Alicorn in her room, though Celestia was certain she checked there before. Sitting in the dark in front of her mirror. "There you are, Luna. Come now. We'll have to be in a hurry, or we'll be late." Something made the words die on Celestia's tongue. Just a glimpse in Luna's mirror. Hard to make out in the dim light. Something wrong with her sister's reflection. Subtle, but startling. She couldn't quite... Then Luna was turning about, walking toward her. It was just her beautiful sister. Just a trick of the shadow, then. She couldn't help the small sigh of relief that she breathed anyway. "Well, Celestia, you was just saying we'll be late if we don't hurry." Luna had walked past her into the hall. Celestia blinked and nodded. "Of course, yes, of course. Coming!" A cheerful tone in answer, enough to try and perk Luna's own, was slightly dour and curt. She gave a last glance at the mirror, and she turned to follow the slightly smaller Alicorn. She then shook her head and hurried after her. Just a trick of the shadow. The dawn came gloriously. It was some of her best work yet, Celestia thought, as she drifted back to the ground while the gathered ponies cheered. She smiled for them, and then turned to look at Luna with a slightly less decorous grin. They established a tradition of both standing with wings spread and heads high after dawn and dusk on this day, showing the people and their princesses united in harmony. The look would be the signal for Luna to come forward and join her on the platform, as it had been for years now. Normally, Luna hopped eagerly to her place at Celestia's side. This time, though, her younger sister wasn't even watching when Celestia turned to her. In fact, Luna's head was turned away from her elder sister and the entire scene. She appeared to be staring angrily at something on the ground. It made Celestia pause and blink again in surprise, and after several awkward seconds, urgently whisper her sister's name. "Luna!" No response. "Luna, come on!" The younger Alicorn looked to her finally, but instead of the smile that typically accompanied this moment, her face held a stony, dour expression, even more pronounced than the one she had hours ago in the castle. Luna beat her wings once to reach the platform, and Celestia turned so they could present themselves to the assembled crowd together. Luna never smiled, and as soon as they lowered their wings, her younger sister was off again, hopping off the platform and trotting away. Celestia tried calling after her, but then the crowd was coming forward, pressing her with praise and adoration. She couldn't very well leave them. It would be uncouth. But she found herself starting to worry for her sister, even as she looked away to give the typical responses to the praise.
"Princess Celestia, is Princess Warner going to be out before nighttime?"
Celestia looked with surprise down at the little foal, asking her the question. It was an adorable creature, with his wide, deep blue eyes, blue-black coat, and little wings. Oh, and he already had his mark. A starfield showed prominently on his flank. Very surprising in one so young, and brave, to approach one of the princesses. Much so did the other foals, who were obviously his friends, hiding several dozen yards back behind a tree. She smiled, turning to look down at him directly.
"We are afraid we cannot say, young colt. Dost thou have a message for our sister?"
The child cowered a bit, but was himself now. The traditional royal Canterlot voice tended to have that effect, close up. Celestia was really starting to reconsider its use. Before visibly steeling himself, extending to his full, quite short height.
"Just tell her I think my friends think she's wonderful. Even though our parents don't let us stay up after nighttime, we're going to form a group just for her."
Celestia's smile turned from amused to touch. All the times Luna had lamented to her about ponies not appreciating her knight, this would be a delightful thing to tell her. She nodded at the little foal. We shall do this. And who we might say is the bearer of this message of adoration? The child blinked up at her, confused for a few seconds, then realized Ace had cut his eyes wide, and his grin returned.
Wallace, Mom. Princess. Ma'am,
Celestia giggled.
Polaris, then. Our sister shall know of thy devotion as soon as we can tell of her of it.
His grin got even wider. Celestia could see where his name had come from. Those eyes sparkled like stars.
Thank you, Princess Celestia.
The little Pegasus bowed, then half ran, half stubbornly flew back to his friends. Was also probably included 2 unicorns, 2 earth ponies, and 1 other Pegasus. Yes, it's the main 6 ancestors. Breathlessly exclaiming about its exchange, Celestia watched them for a few moments, then turned away to sweep her gaze over the crowd of assembled ponies, smile slipping a little. She would tell Luna at the earliest opportunity, but she shouldn't have to. Her sister should have been at or near her side the whole day, save for the portion of it she was asleep, to accommodate her different waking habits. But she had barely caught a glimpse of Luna since that morning. The last time she'd seen her at all had been hours ago, sitting under the shade of a large tree, and apparently glaring at the thronging herd of ponies. It was not like Luna to behave this way. It worried her. A worry only made worse when the day came to the end, and it came time for Luna to step in and perform her role. She appeared from nowhere, literally teleporting into place right next to Celestia, then walking past her from the platform. With a stylized sun ring now replaced by a crescent moon, Luna didn't even get the chance to tell her about the foal and his friends. Luna had ascended a few steps to the top of the dais, spread her wings as her horns shimmered to life, and then paused, looking out over the drowsy crowd assembled. It was always this way. Most foals were exhausted and sleeping by the time moonrise came around, and many ponies were just as tired from the festivities of the day, having stayed up to the previous night to watch Celestia raise the sun. A sea of sleepy faces and half-shut eyes greeted Luna, as it always did, but opposed to the smiling, or sighing as we've seen in recent years, and bearing it, Luna's face twisted in anger. A horn bright blight for a set moment, and the moon shot into view with none of the younger alicorn's usual art or grandeur. A murmur of confusion ran through the crowd, magnified when Luna turned and leapt into the air, flying back toward the castle without even waiting for the applause. Celestia was rapidly moving beyond worried. As she looked into the air after her sister calling her name, she caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of her eye. That young Pegasus with the Starfield mark had somehow snuck his way into the front of the crowd, directly in front of the dais. He had such a crestfallen look on his face.
Luna, wait a moment! What was that back there? What happened?
Celestia's voice echoed through the empty castle halls. Most of the servants were asleep at this hour. Only those responsible for setting things in order for the nighttime still moving through the building. Outside the windows, a sliver of orange dust still showed on the horizon, left there after Luna's incomplete rising of the moon. Celestia could have finished the task herself, but to do so would have been to impose on her sister's role, a thing beyond uncouth, and she was in any case far too worried about Luna right now to more than note that fact in passing. Still, seeing orange and yellow light below a bright moon at this hour was bizarre. It made her uncomfortable, and it helped to make everything else about the current situation the same. The way her voice echoed, the way her sister marched ahead of her without even looking back to acknowledge her presence. That strange, frightening thing she had seen in the morning in Luna's mirror stood out in her mind. It was silly, but she half expected Luna to turn about and find her eyes were, "I think I shall not lower the moon come dawn." Celestia had to actually stop and think about what her sister said before she could respond. In the back of her mind, she noticed he reached the throne room. A sense of wrongness felt even stronger now as he teleported in front of the younger Alicorn, smiling, hoping that Luna had just been joking. What she said was,
Luna, that's bad. You can't keep the moon up forever. It would plunge the land in eternal night. Just imagine. Imagine what? Celestia.
There was something about the way Luna said her name, the searing near mockery in it made Celestius back up a step.
Imagine that for once your precious daytime might not come around when every pony is set to revel and play again. Imagine that they might have to move through my night, and so a little of that adoration they all heap on you might be skinned away. Oh yes, we can't have that, can we?
Luna, what are you?
Shut up!
Celestia jerked backwards, as if her sister had struck her. And in a momentary silence, Luna continued, yelling now, body lowering toward crowds, as if she was set to attack her older sister.
Always loving you, adoring you and your great work. Well, I will not stand for it anymore, sister!
Luna,
what are you saying?
Her sister was so angry. Angrier than the time Celestia had accidentally torn her favorite doll, practicing levitating from her above her horn. Angrier than any fight they ever had. But this was more than a sisterly fight. This was a kind of being mad Celestia had never even thought of before. It frightened her, but not as much as what happened next. The waves of light flared in Luna's eyes, unnatural even for magic. She always envied her sister in her beautiful blue coat, though she never said that, of course. And so, when the horrid, too dark black began to crawl across it, she couldn't help but her voice reaching to a scream.
Luna, what's wrong? What's happening? I will not! Luna!
There was a terrible sound, like the sky cracking open, like a dirge made of thunder.
There's only room for one princess in Equestria, and that will be me!
She lay in the midst of broken masonry and rock dust, cough and whimpering as she tried to stagger back up the shaking hose. Through the smoke, the thing that was not her sister walked toward her, horrible snake-slit eyes burning in the dark.
They will love me now, Celestia. There will be no more of your disgusting daytime, no more foul sunlight to obscure my glory. I'll end this perfect night unmarred by the fire dawn.
She and Luna had fought about this, of course. Little arguments here and there, the way sisters would. She couldn't help it that every pony played and worked during the day and slept through the night. They both had important roles, and neither of them would willingly try to supplant each other. Day and night were part of a cycle, one that helped all living things renew themselves and thrive. An endless night that would see plants withering and dying, and certainly after see ponies doing the same. Just the way an endless day would have the same effect. Luna knew that! But the thing stalking toward her from the shadows did not care. Celestia stood on her hose and looked weakly around the room she had been thrown into. Something sparked in the feeble light that crept past the terrible monster. The elements of harmony! They were in the holding chamber for the elements of harmony! The battle of discord flashed through her head. Madness all about them, and the blaze of the elements. The spell Luna had thought of cast between them. Sheer power of the elements. What that power could do.
Goodbye, sister!
The thing sneered the word, rearing above her. Somehow, Celestia found the strength to leap out of the way, beating her wings to carry herself away from hooves that came down so hard they sent cracks spidering through a stone 12 feet in every direction. She landed amongst the elements in a tumble. Her right wing felt wrong, hurt so badly, but she stood, turned toward the creature as it laughed at her. The elements flared bright. The laughter stopped. Whatever nightmare before her was, it knew the things Luna did. It understood what the elements could do.
No!
In her mind, Celestia saw a bright image. Her and her sister laughing as they flew about the castle towers, playing tag at dawn. There was a terrible, beautiful sound, like the world singing one long high note, like a chorus of searing light. When the sound and light stopped, she thought she had failed. It was so dark. Rumbling sounded from far off, yet all around, a sound she had come to realize. Over the last eternity of hours in her mad struggle against the nightmare, was stone collapsing in on itself. The darkness, no, the smoke began to clear.
Luna?
She began to raise her wings, but the right refused to move. She found herself whimpering again at the effort. As a response, though, a breeze gusted up from the east, pushing away the smoke further.
Luna? Sister?
The elements lay scattered in the ruined ground around her, dim now. Where the nightmare moon, it had called itself Nightmare Moon, where it had stood, there was nothing. She was alone. High above, the full moon grew dim in the burgeoning rays of the dawn. She could see the new shape etched to the surface all too well. The tears somehow fell harder than the pain in her wing.
Sister? Sister, I'm sorry!
No answer came. Even the stones had grown silent. The moon simply waned dimmer in the glowing light. Her voice broke and tumbled over her next words, while tears scattered burning lines down her cheeks.
I had no choice, Luna. No choice.
She wept for days afterwards. It was all she could do to drink a little water, eat a bit of apple that tasted like ashes in between sobs. She had taken up a new bedroom in the other castle. She couldn't bear to even look at the old one, the suite of rooms she had shared with her sister. Eventually she stopped crying, and then she stopped almost doing everything. She ignored her duties save for the bare minimum required. Uninspired dawns as she hurried through so she could return to important matters, delegating issues of state to clerks and chancellors and other kingdom officials. The entirety of her days soon found her in the castle library, poring over book after book, scroll after scroll. She knew what she had done, instinctively. A powerful working beyond any simple magical spell, banishing the monster that supplanted her sister to the moon. And such grand works of magic always had added rules, conditions, limits. But try as she might, she could find nothing in all the library books that could tell her the one thing she wanted to know: how to undo the spell and bring Luna back. Is this to say that that book that she's looking for is back in the Crystal Empire? Shoot! She did find out what the creature she fought for her life against was, though. A few obscure tests told her everything. A demon, a creature form of anger and resentment, a negative emotion given shape and sentience. That Luna had been so angry at her, she had not known. She did not cry, only because tears would have slowed her research, and she needed to do more. For Dex did not tell her the most important thing: how to be rid of the demon and restore her sister. When she exhausted the library's resources twice over, she extended her search into Equestria proper. Older libraries in far-off cities, secret places and hidden stores, near-forgotten secrets etched into stone and lost places no ponies ever went. All of it useless. Finally, her search took her to far-off lands, and to Zabrika, who lived in them. It was there, in a hut decorated with masks and other strange-seeming artifacts, she heard the prophecy. 1,000 years. That was the doom she had laid on her sister. 1,000 years of imprisonment in the moon, which no force could end prematurely. She had nearly wept again to hear that, but the rest of the prophecy forced her to stop. For at the end of those 1,000 years, the stars themselves would aid in her escape. Once again, no force would prevent it. The nightmare that had replaced her sister would return. And then what? Celestia would be older, more powerful in that time, but to fight that terror again. Images of the destroyed castle flickered through her mind. The forest that even now had begun grown gnarled and twisted all around it from the energies unleashed over the course of that horrible night. Any elements of harmony were lost to her, the connection sundered with Luna's loss. No, she could not face Nightmare Moon again, even were she somehow able to. To truly defeat the monster would mean... Luna. There had to be another way. Some way to free her sister from the evil that had overtaken her. But everything she studied, every lead she followed led only to the necessary destruction of Nightmare Moon. Her, or Equestria. Nowhere was any other option even hinted at. It would have made her weep again, if tears were a thing she allowed herself any longer. But tears would not bring Luna back, so she had discarded them. Instead, she'd thrown herself into a rage, one that had seen her hurling books from the shelves in the castle library, using her magic to make a catastrophe of the room as she shrieked in anger at the hopelessness of it. It was in the aftermath. She sat surrounded by the hurricane-tossed looking books, the scrolls and parchment pages, that the High Chancellor stepped into the room and picked his way carefully across the floor to bow and speak with her. She told him to go away, but he insisted that his message was important. She snapped bitterly at him to hurry, glaring at a book that lay sadly splayed on the floor, like a wounded bird. The Chancellor spoke, and told her of the problems in Equestria. The thrown-off timekeeping, the improperly growing crops, the way days of constantly weak light were starting to affect his ancestry. She had taken over the rising of the moon and breaking of night in her sister's absence, of course. It wasn't impossibly hard. They had more than once helped each other when the other was sick, and it was an easy, if imperfect, step from there to doing it on one's own. But she had been performing Luna's duties the same way she had been performing her own, perfunctorily, with no more effort or attention paid than it took to bring the day or night into barest sense. And that only when she remembered to have missed her studies, and her necklaces had been showing, in haphazard days all across Equestria. The way time could no longer be properly kept by the passes of sun and moon. She should have been shocked as she let things evolve to that state. But the anger was still fresh and hot in her chest as she snapped at the Chancellor that she seen to it when she could, and to leave. Instead, the stallion stayed in place, and spoke very calmly. "Forgive my boldness, Princess, but what was the point of banishing your sister?" She rounded on him then, her horn flaring bright in her anger. The stallion never batted an eye. "If all the suffering you did to prevent is going to happen anyway, because of your grief." Then she stopped surely as his words put reins in her mouth and yanked them. He was right, of course. The High Chancellor tended to be. He was that kind of pony. There had not been a day since that night that had been truly sunny, nor a night that had been properly cool and refreshing. She did not want to devote time to her duties. They would distract from research, from trying to find some way to rescue her sister. But it was necessary. She hung her head as her horn flickered out again. Proper court manners crept in, even amidst her shame. "Thou art right, Chancellor. We shall correct the situation immediately." "Excellent, Princess." It was necessary, so it would be done. And though she took no joy for the exuberance of the castle's inhabitants when the next day dawned with more of the old glory she put into her work, their cheers did at least make taking the time away from her research, as well as performing the task her sister should have been there to do, easier to bear. Day and night fell back into their proper places in Equestria, and for the people, things slid back to normal. For Celestia, she performed her duties studiously from then onward, though with a professional distraction eating at her mind. She accepted the compliments about how well she did raising the moon and bringing the night in her sister's absence without as much grace and tact as she could. She soon mastered the trick of masking her true feelings with a believable smile and soft expression. Most of the compliments were earnest ignorance in any case, and the others well-intentioned lies. Luna had been able to make each moonrise and nightfall into a work of art, carefully crafted and beautifully executed. It was all Celestia could do to create uninspired dusk and moonrises, like the blandly functional dawns and days immediately following that awful night. It was not their fault that they could not understand. Seed and Luna were tied intrinsically to their roles. Without her sister there, it felt as though something indescribably precious had been damaged, half of it carved away to leave a gaping, hollow wrongness that lurked always on the edge of Celestia's perception. She had to save her sister, but everything she found said the only way to rid Nightmare Moon was to destroy her. It was weeks later, cleaning up the library. She had insisted the castle servants leave it for her to do, as she had made the mess in the first place, that the answer came to her. A trick of wording in one of the oldest scrolls he had found on the subject. The demon calling itself Nightmare Moon had consumed Luna, but it was not her sister. The understanding that it howled like dragon roars in her head during those desperate hours of battle and terror became cool and clear in the warm daylight filtering in through a library window. For Luna to be saved, the demon had to be destroyed. But Celestia could not do that. She used the elements of harmony in desperation, striking out and trying to defend Equestria and herself. She hadn't wanted to slay the monster before her because had been her sister. Even if she could have still wielded the elements, she couldn't have used them to slay the monster with her sister trapped within. Even thinking about the library, safe in her daylight, knowing it was the only thing that might rescue Luna, made her shudder and want to retch. But some pony not attached to Luna, who would act on Equestria's behalf without that block, might be able to. But where would she find a pony with that kind of power, and one with no connection to Luna, no affection for her sister? The people loved their princesses, even now. She knew of vigils that had been held for Luna's loss at Canterlot. Candles lit at night with magic, so they resembled stars. For the citizenry of Equestria to turn against the lost princess was unthinkable, and necessary if she was to ever get her sister back. The hot, rolling thing that had twisted in her chest since the end of that night turned hard then. For her sister to be saved, she had to see that pony cease thinking of her as their princess. That pony ceased loving her. The foal for the festival with his big bright eyes stood out in her mind. She banished the image. It was necessary to save her sister. And so, it would be done. It was easy. Rumors had started filtering out of the castle from the first day afterward. All she needed to do was let slip a few more in the right places, and have the prophecy deceivers had written her down by certain scholars. Almost immediately the rumors took wing, and like a startled Pegasus, as rumors were wont to do. Soon the tale had acquired its own life. Instead of a desperate struggle for survival, the stories, and the art that sprung up around them, drew a picture of mighty and brave Celestia, standing strong and battling the demon, with artistic representations of the banishment that had ended the battle. She tolerated it all as best she could. A sincere, seeming smile here, a graceful, humble nod there. There were bumps, of course. The first time someone had actually to speak ill of Luna in Celestia's earshot, it was all she could do to not attack them, demanding that they be taken from her sight. Talking of Princess Luna at all in her presence became quietly taboo soon after that. Which was fine. It gave her more time to turn the other pressing issue over in her head, while she smiled and nodded, and occasionally focused to give more small speeches or oversee festivals. She needed a pony powerful enough to wield the elements of harmony against Nightmare Moon. But some pony like that would be 1 in a million, at best. Even with unicorns being the only possible candidates, she could scour Equestria for one so magically talented, devote the full resources of her kingdom to the task, and still never find them. Not to mention, it would quickly have the people thinking she was some terrible dictator bent on stealing their children. The first thing to truly distract her from that question came in the form of an ironic echo of worry. A burgeoning uprising in a city not far from Canterlot. A group of ponies who had somehow convinced themselves that Celestia had intentionally removed her sister from the kingdom, and had been telling the same thing to every pony they could. When she heard of it, she grew so angry she couldn't see properly. She barely remembered ordering the group's arrest, the flight and teleportation to the town where they had been based. In fact, the thing that had actually snapped her back to something like clarity was the sight of the group's leader. Blue-black coat, gray mane, deep blue eyes, and Starfield on his flank. The breathless colt from the summer sun celebration. Though the eyes were different now, not so large on his face, and an angry fixed on her as she stopped outside the dungeon cells he and his cohorts had been stuffed into. He was so much older, a stallion now. Had that much time really passed since that day? She forgot how short-lived other ponies were sometimes. It felt at times as though she blinked, and children would be grown and running to their parents' businesses. The parents enjoying their old age, and grandparents no longer there spoken in reverent tones. It was a hard perspective to have on one's own. Luna would have shared it, had been able to relate it. She stared at him through the cell bars for a long time, forsaking herself back to sense and ordering the guards to open the door. That done, they relocated to a small room a little ways down the hall, where milky sunlight filtered down from a barred window high on the wall. Celestia had walked to the other side of the rough wooden table at the center of the room, and bid the guards leave. Then as he turned to face the angry young stallion and spoken. Thou hast incited rebellion in our kingdom. 'Tis a grave crime, and thy reasoning is suspect. Canst thou truly believe we would banish our own sister for personal gain? He glared at her for a second before speaking, and when he did, the sheer anger in his tone left Celestia taken back. No one had spoken to her that way since, well, Luna. Of course! Princess Luna was devoted to her role and her people, even though so few appreciated her. But everyone loved you, so you just wanted to make sure you had everyone's adoration, didn't you? Celestia found herself caught between fury and a heart-wrenching kind of sorrow. That he could dare accuse her of such after what she had been through, what had happened, that sparked wrath. She could see the pain in his eyes, hear it trembling in his voice, and it kept her on the precipice between sympathy and rage. It also kept her from stopping him, though, and as Luna had, he continued in her silence. Admit it! You were always jealous of her, so you got rid of her and spread this ridiculous story so nobody would suspect you! That tipped her to the edge. You just wanted Equestria to alter your silence! She reared as she yelled at him, slamming her hose down on the table so hard that the wound splintered all the way through, sawdust trickling to the ground beneath. Outside the thin window, the sunlight flared impossibly bright for a second, as though lightning had struck right there on the road. Within the room, Celestia's horn blazed golden fire, casting sharp shadows across the space. Polaris jerked away from her, cowering back. Celestia breathed heavily, looking into those wide, deep blue eyes. Terror didn't suit him. Inspiring it did not suit her. She took a last, trembling breath, then exhaled, her horn's light fading as she took her hose from the small crater she had made in the table. She turned away from him then, to look out the narrow window at the sky above. From this angle at this hour, she could almost make out the approaching dusk. She told him everything, starting from the time she had taken off after Luna at the festival, going through every detail she remembered in that frantic fight for her life against Nightmare Moon, though what she had done in the years following, up to when she had realized what it would take to bring Luna back. And then from her setting her plans into motion to now, she turned to face him again as she finished, and for the first time in years there were tears faintly stinging her eyes, so she would not let them fall. Polaris looked back at her with a sympathy and sorrow that nearly overrode her refusal to cry. I understand, Princess. I'm sorry for making it harder. You can consider our uprising at an end. Thank you, Polaris, but it twisted at her insides what she had to say next. You understand, I cannot just let this whole thing go by unaddressed. If people see Rebellion Star, you could... You don't have to say anything more. He was smiling at her now, full of understanding. Celestia couldn't decide if that made what she had to do better or worse. The blue-coated Pegasus struck a pose, wings up and smiling bravely. Luna would have been lucky to have a servant in him. Whatever our princess deems suitable for her crime, we will accept. I'll tell the others. I'm sure they'll understand. She had no words for him, just nodded her head and moved past him to call the guards, forgetting entirely to use the royal Candlelight voice. She told him to take the young stallion back to his cell. Polaris stiff-backed and calm as the guards marched him away. Celestia turned towards the stairs and laughed. It was necessary to save Luna. He understood. She was about to set foot onto the street when the idea flashed life in her head. It saw her turning and bolting down the steps, skipping the last few dozen yards by teleporting to appear directly in front of the trio, outside the cells holding Polaris' friends. She made herself tall and stern, eyes half-lidded and face cold she spoke. Polaris, was it? We have decided a much more suitable sentence for thou and thy cohorts. His friends cowered back in their cells. Even her guards had shied away, between the way she holding herself and the transient voice in a small space. Polaris had ducked his head as she thundered in front of him, but he kept his eyes on her, the question obvious in them. And so it was that Polaris' Seekers were founded, a small and secret group of fervently loyal ponies, who were spread out over Equestria at Celestia's command, in search for unicorns with exceptional magical talent. They turned up a few results, but were never daunted despite the odds. They understood that for now they were the princess's best hope. Both princesses. So they searched. As Celestia performed her duties, turned the issue over her head, and waited. The answer came to her while paying attention to the mayor of some town, going on about tourism and the way it was starting to flourish as a concept. If you can't reach out to the ponies, make sure the ponies want to come to you. It clicked so sharply, Celestia actually froze in place. No muffin she had been levitating in front of her open mouth for several seconds before dropping, bouncing off her plate to land on the table. Then she hurriedly thanked the mayor and excused herself, much to the stallion's confusion. The concept was already falling neatly into her place in her head as her guards hurried after her. She actually took off into the sky on her own, boggling the golden armored ponies for several seconds before they hurried in pursuit, leaving her chariot behind. A place all magically gifted unicorns would want to go. It was so obvious it would literally border on the painful. She blamed the relatively obscure concept, even as she laid the foundation in her mind to make it distinctly less so. A school known throughout the land for any unicorn with significant magical talent to attend? It is a great idea, Princess, but the scope of it, nobody has tried something of that sort before! Well, Chancellor, we are trying it now, and it will succeed, we promise you. She did not like this Chancellor as much as the old one, who had scolded her after her tantrum in the library. But it was over a century later, after all. All of the castle staff had been replaced by now, succeeded by children or new arrivals. Ponies had never laid eyes on Luna, and knew her only from the stories their elders told, and the tales that Celestia had sent about Equestria. She eyed the nervous Chancellor, made so after her hard tone and the near glare she fixed him with. She was acquiring a reputation as terrible, she realized. Her focus on the plan for rescuing her sister was making her ignore the feelings of the ponies around her. So she softened her expression a little, moving the corners of her mouth with a smile, even though she truly didn't feel like it. She hadn't really smiled in decades. But it would be good to treat the stallion and others about her with a bit more kindness. They'd have friends again, even if they would be short-lived in comparison to her. And besides, the Chancellor and others in similar positions would be invaluable in short order. With her short-term perspectives, Celestia could not risk blinking and missing the whole generations once her school was founded. The role it served was much too important for that. While the building was under construction, Celestia set other things in motion, laid the groundwork of how word of the school would be spread across Equestria, and worked on a very specific magic spell. One of stasis, that would freeze a pony in a timeless sleep until they were awakened by certain conditions. She used a variant of twice before, once with Luna's help, and once against the demon she had become. But now she had to cast it on her own. There were still many centuries left until Nightmare Moon's release. If she found a unicorn with that kind of power, she needed even 100 years before the right time. She would need some way of keeping them alive until then. If only she would be so lucky. Within what seemed a few heartbeats, her school was built. It was a grand building, as buildings were reckoned, and once the word went out, unicorns came from all over Equestria to apply for acceptance. At first, she tested every candidate personally. She even learned how to gracefully let down the many who didn't pass after the fourth time of a crying filly or colt fleeing from the room in response to her curt words of rejection. It was years before her school had gained enough graduates to allow the Illuminae to take over the entrance exams, and at that time, Celestia had already found herself growing impatient with the school's results, or rather, lack thereof. No matter the strength of the unicorn, it was never enough. She was helpful about a few early candidates, even took one colt as a direct apprentice, thinking of the laces she found the one she needed so soon. But his abilities peaked well before the point she required. As years rolled on into decades, she found herself starting to dislike the students, even resent them. How, in all Equestria, could there be no pony with the capabilities she needed? The logic that had warned her of this possibility, when she set the school's founding in motion, was subsumed by frustration, as the decades ground forward without any student even coming close to what she required, until the wonders started happening. The first one came when a graduate of the school created a spell to fix the plague that was destroying crops throughout the entire eastern portion of Equestria. The second, when a filly from the same graduating class diverted an entire thunderstorm from its crash course into a town, sending it safely out over the ocean to disperse. One created a number of spells high enough to put Star Swirl the Bearded to shame. Another a way of diverting water without disturbing the animal life within. And they continued on that way. In ones, twos, and more, graduates of her school accomplishing remarkable things out in Equestria. The successes were so remarkable they pushed through Celestia's focus on her sister just enough to set another idea in her head. If a single school simply for unicorns could accomplish this, what about schools for other ponies? The Pegasi and Earth Pony and all the rest. If he gave them schools of their own, what would they accomplish? Others had the idea first, of course, trying to start up places where all of the town's young ponies could learn. Celestia had drawn the idea from her own school from them. But they were individuals trying to help a dream to live. And with the power of the crown behind their ideas, however. And so it happened. A royal edict. And then a decade or more of effort. The schools were springing up through every town in Equestria. Within another century, nearly every single town had one of their own. And the accomplishments. One young stallion with an interest in machinery created the most wonderful things. Tools and structures to help with the farming that no pony had ever thought of before. Another, centuries later, pioneered the entire concept of medical study, making it possible for ponies, besides very particularly gifted unicorns, to be doctors, healers. A filly created machines powered by steam of all things, and the study of science turned into a field so large it acquired its own schools of independent of any intervention by Celestia. Centuries after that came one of Celestia's favorites, when a graduate of her school for unicorns and a pony from a nearby city figured out a way to mix magic and science to store and channel electricity, lightning and miniature imagined, to power machines and light buildings. It was not the purpose she had founded her school for centuries prior, but Celestia couldn't feel proud of the students and what they had achieved. If she could not have the unicorn that would save her sister, bettering the entirety of Equestria would be an acceptable substitute. For now. The problem became the way for now stretched out for hundreds of years. The altercation of Equestria's attitude towards Luna was complete with a scant 400 years after Celestia sent in Morrison, with the ushering of some kind of holiday called Nightmare Moon Night, which apparently revolved around the fantasy of Nightmare Moon flying about Equestria and devouring children. It galled Celestia like fire in her chest, but it meant she was a step closer to Luna's salvation. She bore it, as the more pressing problem of finding a gifted unicorn was still unresolved. And it looked set to stay that way. Her school had taken on a life of its own, blossoming out through Canterlot and perpetually growing and being renewed, like when a tower had to be rebuilt after one filly had blown the top clear off in what witnesses described as a marshmallow geyser, testing some kind of method for his perfect s'more. But despite the many unicorns that came to apply, there were still none who were suited to the task. Even the few students Celestia took for apprentices all peaked well before the threshold she required. Out in Equestria, the descendants of Polaris' seekers had no better luck. The date of Nightmare Moon's release grew inexorably closer. Probably desperation, Celestia went to the Zebras again. She hoped the passes of centuries within whatever fog of time they peered through when she first received their prophecy, allowed them some further insight to the events to come. But after another individual amount of time in one of their huts, so changed yet so similar to how they had been. The zebra mare looked up at Celestia and shook her head. I am sorry, princess, but you must wait. Finding this pony, it is up to fate. After that, Celestia began to look herself, going to towns and cities under invented ponies' pretenses to check on fillies and colts the seekers had noted for their potential. She had just returned to Canterlot after one trip, checking on a pale blue filly with a not inconsiderable talent for magic and a very obvious love of performing "Hello, everybody!" His parents were a bit too excited about what Celestia had tried to portray as casual interest when it happened. There was a terrible, spectacular sound, a hip-pitched whine preceding a deafening explosion, accompanying a shockwave that looked to be formed of a single, continuous rainbow. It spread out from one end of the horizon to the other, a sight unlike anything Celestia had ever seen. Almost immediately afterward, there was another explosion, though this one was caused by something much more mundane. a giant dragon suddenly bursting up out of the entrance to the examination tower. Well, for a given definition of mundane, Celestia had to take a moment to process what she was seeing. Before the meeting of the bolt's lavender light, its sheer sensation of what was happening in the tower struck her. That was the tower where the school's newest hopeful, a purple filly by the name of Twilight Sparkle, as she recalled correctly, was taking her test. None of the examiners had the power on the scale she was seeing. None were even close. Celestia was bolting for the tower before she even realized she moved. The child could hurt herself, with that much magical energy being released at once. And hey, she might have been close to being on Sunset's level. No, I am never sorry. And on that tail of thought, so tremendous she barely dared to allow it, was another. None of the examiners had power on that scale. No pony she ever encountered had power on that scale. Well, except for maybe Sunset. 1 in a million. When she reached the room, she immediately ducked a lavender bolt of magic that struck the door behind her, turning it into a very particular kind of trout. The filly the bolt came from was caught in the midst of an absolute maelstrom of magical energy, to such a degree that she drew the eye more to the gigantic dragon currently on the vacant floor creek, or the levitating examiners, or the potted plants in the corner that Celestia guessed were actually other ponies. The power of it, like nothing she had ever heard of, and the prospect of what she could do if focused, given direction, that tremendous hope almost froze her in place. Almost. Sister, I found her! I found her at long last! When she moved, everything about her was calm and focused. The anxiety and excitement tread down deep to where it could not interfere. She sidestepped an absent twist of the dragon's tail, ducked under another lavender bolt that turned a section of the ceiling incandescent, watched until she stood next to the overwhelmed filly, reached out to place a hoof gently on her shoulder. Frightened, light-consumed eyes turned to her, and Celestia smiled softly. Kindness could conquer so much that ponies never thought it could. And it worked. The maelstrom of magical energy quieted, and the blazing light faded from the purple filly's eyes as she floated back to the ground. The potted plants turned back to ponies. Celestia could now identify as the child's parents. The examiners dropped back into their seats. The dragon resumed his proper newborn form and probably began sucking on his own tail. Twilight Sparkle. The poor filly seemed to panic. Understandable, considering she had just been caught making a magical catastrophe out of the examination room. I'm so sorry! I didn't mean... Celestia cut her off. It was easy. She had known that she was going to say this at the moment for a part of the millennia. You have a very special gift. I don't think I've ever come across a unicorn with your raw abilities. Huh? But you need time to turn these abilities through focus study. Huh? Twilight Sparkle. I'd like to make you my own personal protege here at the school. Huh? Well? The filly glanced back at her parents, who nodded like mad. Excellent. Celestia wouldn't have to coerce or coax their agreement, as had happened with some of her earlier apprentices. The filly looked back at her. Her eyes even got wider, as her hanging open mouth turned up into a brilliant smile. The young girl leaping into the air. Yes! One more thing, Twilight. More? An excitable creature, this filly. Celestia had already run through her practice dialogue, but something pressed her to the point to point out the mark that had appeared on the girl's flank just seconds ago. Thus remembered the moment perfect in the filly's mind, and a realization that surprised her own. As the girl literally jumped for joy about her, Celestia ducked her head and closed her eyes. She could not celebrate the way her newest apprentice was, but a moment of silence and near joy was called for at least. Twilight. The link between night and day. It had to be fate. I found her, Luna. Just a little longer now. Twilight Sparkle was perfect. The child was eager to learn and studious literally unto a fault. Celestia quickly found that she had to impose strict limits on their lessons herself, lest the young filly work at whatever task the princess set her until she fell over from exhaustion. And so quick to learn new things. Within a few years, the filly could grasp the trick of teleportation. At her age, even if a skill there was far from mastery, it was still remarkable. Every other apprentice Celestia had taught peaked within a few years. Not so with Twilight Sparkle. The mind-boggling powers she had seen on display by filly in the examination tower remained apparent, though tampered down by control. past the point any of her other apprentices had reached, and onward. Every spell Celestia had set her to learn, every little magical skill, grasped and mastered, or nearly so in short order. But something funny happened. While Celestia molded and directed the young filly, Twilight Sparkle was affecting her too. Her other appearances had been eager to learn, certainly, and each had grown close with the princess. But they each had their own reasons for apprenticeship. To help a town home, to be the greatest of a particular kind of magical expertise. In contrast, Twilight always seemed the most satisfied by nothing more than Celestia's approval, and the way it showed it. The bright happiness in her eyes when they met for breakfast in the mornings, or the bubbly excitement when she ran to her mentor to show off the latest magical trick or she perfected, or just the adoration she looked up while Celestia gave her lessons. And it reminded her of Polaris, much the same look that Pegasus had so many years ago, when speaking of Celestia's sister. And in the face of it, Celestia couldn't help but be shaped a little herself. She found her smiles for Twilight were less false, laughter almost shrilly joyful when she shared a joke with the young filly, or when Twilight Sparkle did something funny, such as focusing so hard on turning a red book green, she almost leaned too far forward and nearly tumbled off her chair. It was strange but fitting that this little filly should be the first in centuries to find a way past the veneer Celestia wore about herself. Within years, Celestia found she wasn't pushing Twilight to succeed, just to prepare her for the trial ahead. She was pushing her to see someone she cared for succeed, doing all she could to make Twilight more than just the tool she originally saw her as. And Luna helped her. It felt right. Celestia paced the halls of the castle, head down, oblivious to everything around her. For the first time in hundreds of years, she stepped away from all her duties for the day. Everything aside from Sunrise had been delegated to members of the court and other subjects, to free the princess to focus on the fear that had plagued her for days. Twilight was not going to work, and it was Celestia's fault. She had been so pleased with the girl's doing this, so taken with seeing her succeed. She pushed the young mare as much as she could, without straining her to breaking. And Twilight Sparkle, being Twilight Sparkle, had eaten it up and asked for more. The end result being that Celestia had unintentionally turned the girl from a consummate bookworm, more so than she had already been. If not for her connection to Celestia and Spike, the baby dragon from her examination, Twilight would have been an absolute hermit. It had let Celestia direct the girl's studies to a degree of precision she had never had with earlier apprentices. Such is the way she guided Twilight carefully to the Legend of Nightmare Moon in the last few weeks, which she would be reading and researching right now. And while the young mare certainly had enough magic within herself to direct the massive power of the elements of harmony according to her will, she needed friendship in order to make them work. And friendship was the one thing Twilight Sparkle lacked for in the world. Her connection with Spike, Shining, and Cadence would not do. Caught as it was between two siblings, a master and servant, and parent and child, her connection with Celestia was even less suited to the task. Twilight adored her too much, denying the relationship, the sharing, and equality that accompanied true friendship. And there was another problem. Even with all her power, Twilight was not Celestia and Luna. She could not wield the elements of harmony all alone. Celestia could have corrected each problem with time, but she realized she had only realized each of them recently, while going over the final steps of her plans for what would happen on the solstice, running last double and triple checks on every possible variation of offense she could think of. And once she had found the problem, she spent nearly every moment of the last few days desperately trying to think of a way to remedy it. But none came. Celestia would not be there to aid her apprentice. She'd known that from the start. The events played out like a well-illustrated storybook in her mind. Nightmare Moon would appear. Celestia would be nowhere to be found. The demon would plunge the land into permanent night, and Twilight Sparkle would immediately seek a way to stop her and bring back the sun. That would lead her to the elements of harmony, which would inevitably lead to a direct confrontation with the demon. And the thought of Twilight Sparkle, her Twilight, facing Nightmare Moon alone, with what only Celestia had been able to teach her. Unacceptable. She would find a way to save that child from that. But how? Twilight needed friends. One of the very few things Celestia couldn't just wave her horn and gave her. It was like some elaborate, twisted joke. So many pony lifetimes spent preparing for this day. and now she found she had no time. Celestia blinked in surprise at the shattered section of the castle floor where she had stamped her hoof, and as she made a noise of consternation, an extra cry at her foreleg from the ruined marble, something caught the edge of her vision. She turned and looked out the window toward the horizon. She wandered to the side of the castle facing Ponyville, the town where the summer sun celebration was to be held this year, and Celestia suddenly found herself remembering. She had gone there herself a few days ago to make sure it was suited for what was to come. A smaller city, easily evacuated and away from major centers. Panic wouldn't spread from it too quickly when Nightmare Moon made her inevitable appearance. But she wasn't thinking of that now. She was thinking of other details she had not considered at the time. The family of apple farmers who were to handle food for the festival, who Celestia felt were intent on stuffing her to bursting with delicious samples. They had a daughter about Twilight's age, a likable filly, with an honest streak. Celestia smirked and pretended not to hear the blonde-made girl whisper to her older brother about her surprise that Celestia would enjoy their lay-at-home cooking so much. Or the Pegasus with exceptional skill of animals, who was to be handling music. Terribly shy, but equally kind and sweet. The other Pegasus with the riotous mane, set in charge of keeping the weather clear. Brash and loud, but clearly just as fiercely loyal to those she cared for, judging by the way she turned down an invitation from other Pegasi to hang out after the mayor given her the task of clearing the sky. The unicorn in charge of decoration was seemed superficial, as Celestia hadn't heard her argue with the mayor as he was leaving. "For brevity, you have all the words so ready. That upcoming fashion show, and all the dress order for the celebration events. Nonsense! I shall always have time for Ponyville." And then, eccentric Pink Pony was set up a small welcoming party for when Celestia arrived, apparently without any Ponytail's knowledge, who had, last time Celestia had seen her, been bouncing up and down the middle of the city square, giggling with delight, and improvising an entire musical number about the merits of different kinds of cupcake, each of them roughly Twilight Sparkle's age, and each of them the kind of pony Twilight would already take a liking to, if only she was to meet them under the proper circumstances. 6 elements of harmony, 5 good ponies, and the place where the celebration was to be held. She could give Twilight a reason to meet almost every one of them. According to what the mayor had said, the eccentric one would already supply her own once she had noticed a new pony in town. But it would not be that easy. But it could work. She just returned to her throne room, with smoke and green fire curled into the air above her head, coalescing into a scroll that dropped around in front of her hooves. Steady as Twilight, reliable as clockwork. She had read the letters through quickly, already knowing the gist of what it would say, then levitated a quill and parchment into the air. It had to work. Celestia began to write. It came for her in the quiet, as she waited behind the curtains to be ushered in and start the summer sun celebration in Ponyville. No noise save a rustle of like nighttime wind. Then its eyes were there, scorching through the dark, fitting for what she would see those first. The eyes had haunted her dreams for millennia. The rest of the demon came after, stepping out from the shadows, every detail the same. The not quite normally shaped limbs and face, the unnatural liquid black coat of the coat, the rising nebula where a mane and tail should have been. The child Celestia wanted to crawl away into a corner and cower, but the princess had prepared for this moment for 1,000 years, found it arisen rising in her chest, tugging at her lip. She remembered the monster being taller. "Sister!" The demon's voice dripped mockery and arrogance. It knew the outcome of what was about to happen as well as Celestia did. Satisfying then, to see a small hint of an expression when Celestia drew herself up and turned toward it. Cool and controlled, every instant princess. "No, you're not." The demon glared. Its horn flared with a scene in first light. Celestia fought the urge to shut her eyes. "I trust you, Twilight." And then, a terrible, utter silence. Am I? Where? "You fools!" "I can see." "Simmer down, Sally, she ain't no spy. But she sure knows what's going on, don't you, Twilight?" "It is said
The last known location of the five elements was in the ancient castles of the of the royal pony sisters. Twilight, be careful, it sees the Everfree Forest! Flashlight, quick! Let go. Are you crazy? No, I ain't. I promise you'll be safe. That's not true! Now listen higher. What I'm saying to you is the honest truth. Let go, and you'll be safe. A manticore! We gotta get past him! Wait! I'm on it! Wait! Rainbow! Wait! Just my turn for just a second. Child, be careful. How did you know about the thorn? I didn't. Sometimes we all just need to be shown a little kindness. Ah! Pinky, what are you doing? Run! Oh, girls, don't you see? When I was a little filly and the sun was going down. Tell me she's not. Tell me she's not. The darkness and the shadows, they would always make me frown. She is. So, giggle at the ghosty, guffaw at the crusty, crack up at the creepy, whip it up with the weepy, chortle at the cookie, snortle at the spooky, and tell that big dumb scary freak that will leave you alone if you think you get scary, then it'll kind of come out of very stinking so space you wanna laugh! Excuse me, sir. Why are you crying? That's what all the fuss is about. I simply cannot let such a crime against fabulosity go uncorrected. Oh, my. Oh, Rarity, your beautiful tail. Oh, it's fine, my dear. Some tails are in this season. Besides, it'll go back. Rainbow, what's taking so long? Oh, no. Rainbow, don't listen to them! Well, you. No, I chose you. I chose you for your devotion. How could you? Thank you. For the offer, I mean. But I'm afraid I'll have to say no. See? I never leave my friends hanging. Forgive me for doubting, child. The book said when the five are present, a spark will cause the six to be revealed. What in the honey is that supposed to mean? I don't know, but I have an idea. Stand back. I don't know what will happen. Come on now, y'all. She needs to concentrate. Twilight, no. That won't work. You need to... Twilight! Twilight! The elements! Twilight, where are you? Look, come on! Twilight, you can do this. You're kidding. You're kidding, right? You can't fight it like that. You can't... Oh, you clever little thing. Just one spark. Come on! No! But where's the sixth element? You little fool. Thinking you could defeat me? Now you'll never see your princess or your son. The night will last forever! No, not Twilight 2. Please, don't. Don't worry, we'll be there! Oh, Twilight, you're friends. You're friends. You think you could destroy the elements of harmony just like that? Well, you're wrong! Because the spirits of the elements of harmony are right here! The spirit of these five ponies got us through every challenge you threw at us. You still don't hold the sixth element. The spark didn't work. Silly monster. You don't understand. You never did. But it did. A different kind of spark. You see, Nightmare Moon, when those elements are united by the spark that resides in the hearts of us all, it creates the sixth element. The element of magic! Give my sister back. There was a terrible, beautiful sound, like a blazing chorus of light, like the world singing in harmony. Gee, Twilight, I thought you were just spouting a lol-hooey. But I'm working, we really do represent the elements of friendship. Indeed you do. Fitting that the demon will have bound her within sunlight. Felt like the grandest dawn she had created in centuries upon centuries. Princess Celestia! Twilight Sparkle, my faithful student. Faithful, wonderful Twilight. Her smile was honest, she realized. So strange to feel that touching her face. I knew you could do it. But you told me it was all an old ponytail. I told you you needed to make some friends. Nothing more. I saw the signs of Nightmare Moon's return, and I knew it was you who had the magic insight to defeat her. Nearly 1,000 years spent waiting for you, Twilight, and you are worth every one of them. but you could not unleash it until you let true friendship into your heart. Celestia's eyes slid sideways as Twilight turned away from her. They came to rest upon Luna, where she lived amidst the ruins of the monster. Still so small, as if she had been frozen in time all these centuries. A sudden fear struck her, like a phantom of a black horn that stabbed her for chest for a millennia. Nightmare Moon had not sprung into being for nothing. She had been born from Luna's anger and resentment. There on the ground was her sister, seeming exactly as she had been the very instant the demon had come into being. If Luna still held that anger, there was a chance of Nightmare Moon returning. Celestia would have to. All of it took a thought in less than a blink of an eye, span of a second, as Twilight and her friends shared a look. She recovered her mask by reflex, even if it all took her effort to keep her voice from trembling, as that shard in her heart seared colder. Now if only another pony will as well. Princess Luna. Playing the part of Celestia the Unreachable, the distant, powerful ruler. Her head wanted to spin just from walking as she moved closer toward her sister. It would not be the way she feared. Not after so long, not now, when she finally had her back. Luna gasped in breath as Celestia's words called her back into waking, eyes going wide. It's been 1,000 years since I have seen you like this. She dropped to her knees, and Luna cringed. The icy spike was joined by a different kind of pain. For Luna to cringe at her closeness. But she really seemed so terrible to her? She heard the strain in her own voice, unable to keep it out, not wanting to. Time to put our differences behind us. We were meant to rule together, little sister. Sister! She'd done her work well. Even clever Twilight had made the connection. As she had read the tale not 2 days gone. She would have been conflicted over it, if anything else mattered in the world right now but Luna. In her response to Celestia's next question, she stood back up. Will you accept my friendship? She wanted to hurl her back self down on her knees and beg. She wanted to offer Luna the day and night for 1,000 years, if only she'd say yes. Please, 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 please! I'm so sorry! But then Luna was embracing her. Celestia felt the mask cracked. I missed you, big sister. The mask fell to pieces, as tears at long last tumbled from her eyes again. And then, that unidentifiable, half-hallowed place was finally, wonderfully whole. I missed you too. It was funny, Celestia thought to herself. The first time she truly felt joy in 1,000 years. And she was crying again as well. You are free now. You are with me now. Where you'll always be. Okay, hit it! Review time! I love it. There, I think we're done now. Toodles, I love this story. Bye. Okay, I'm not gonna leave you guys hanging. Oh. This story probably serves as a great character piece at best. It truly illustrates what's going through in the mind of a character like Celestia. And it's kind of why I get annoyed by all the fics that we've done in this fandom. Oh, don't take it the wrong way. I love what we do. That's one of the many reasons why this fandom's so great is our creativity. I'm just saying by now, can you really look at this screen and then put down in the comments that anything that the show writers will do from this point on will match up to this? Can you really write down in the comments that the show writers will ever be able to produce something like this? This is the problem with me wanting a Celestia episode. I mean, yeah, I would love it, but the thing is, it won't match. It won't match up. There is no way that they could create something so beautiful like this. They just can't. Whether it be budget or time or effort, they just can't create something this glorious and make it beautiful. And I don't think there are better words to describe just how wonderfully it does. Mixing the elements of tragedy and hope into a single glorious package. And all from the point of view of Celestia. All from her reactions, her characterizations. We're giving an in-depth search into her own personal motivations and why she does what she does. All the side characters just serve to highlight for it. And if anything, what Celestia is going through and her watching this kind of also helps reminds us why the premiere is so awesome and why it drags people like me into the show in the first place. The feeling of a young student facing off against a dark monster alone, then realizing she's not alone, that she could be helped. The elements of friendship, bonding, a moment of light that frees a dark princess. Heroes uniting together to free an evil demon from the dark places of hell. A reunion of two sisters torn apart because one was anger and bitter. It also shows the different sides of Celestia beyond just the cunning chess master or the wise sage or just the tricky mentor. We're seeing the Celestia that, well, I do love to portray that while she does plan for everything, she also knows she has made many, many mistakes in her life, and she is right now holding every single one of those sins in. I love writing Celestia as the mayor who does know what she's doing, but she also holds a lot of pain on her heart. She puts through the effort, but she also knows that she has to try. I love seeing how Celestia was willing to do everything. And the way that the world just gave us a chance to explore how the passage of time worked was really well done, as I actually did feel like the world just passed us by. And reminding us all what it means to be immortal, to truly be immortal. Kind of like what Lorian said once on From Babylon 5. How quick of it all is to flash by. And Celestia realizes that in just a blink, centuries could go by. While there are no really any true OCs or side characters, the story doesn't need it, as we are just given everything Celestia is. It's all out on the table. And I'll admit, I was tearing up at the end of it, because we see just how much effort it truly takes for somebody like this to pull it all off and unite it all together as one. This story is a classic, and it always will be, and I recommend it for everybody. Next time, however, we're going to move from this really serious, dramatic piece to something a little more silly. Here's the trailer.
Sister, I'm bored.
You know what, Luna? I am too. Wanna go play hooky?
Oh, yes. But wouldn't they notice?
Not a chance. Not if you keep quiet. Now, come on. Oh, yes. Two little fillies are about to have a small little fun adventure as we present a Royal Day Off. Join us.